Hello everyone viewers, welcome to our channel. Today we journey back 2 millennia into the heart of a story etched into the very soul of Western civilization. It's a story we think we know, a story of a teacher and his 12 followers, and among them, one name that has echoed through history not as a whisper but as a curse. Judas Iscariot. For 2,000 years, his name has been the ultimate sin. His story is sealed with 30 pieces of silver and a venomous kiss. It's simple, it's clear. It's a cautionary tale of loyalty corrupted by avarice. But what if it's not that simple? What if the story we've been told, the one painted in countless masterpieces and preached from a million pulpits, is only one version of the truth? What if the most reviled man in history was not a traitor, but a key player? What if we are going to peel back the layers of tradition and dogma to look at the man, the motive, and the mystery? We're going to ask the uncomfortable questions, to explore the shadows of the scripture, and to consider a possibility so profound it could change how you see the greatest story ever told. Was Judas Iscariot the betrayer of God, or was he the one chosen for the most terrible, the most necessary, and the most sacred? It's not a peaceful land of rolling hills and shepherds. It is a powder keg, a land seething under the iron boot of the Roman Empire. Every day, the people of Israel see the Roman eagles, the symbols of their subjugation, flying over the holy city of Jerusalem. Taxes are crippling, levied by a foreign power that worships a pantheon of gods and a deified emperor. Roman legions patrol the streets. In this pressure cooker of oppression and simmering rebellion, messianic expectation is at a fever pitch. The people ache for a savior, a Messiah. But their idea of a Messiah is not necessarily a spiritual teacher of love and forgiveness. They are waiting for a warrior king, a new King David, who will take up the sword, drive out the Romans, and restore Israel to its former glory. They are waiting for a political revolution. Iscariot. Some scholars believe it simply means the man from Kerioth, a town in southern Judea. This would make him the only disciple from Judea, an outsider among a tight-knit group of Galileans. An outsider is always watched, always slightly apart, but other, more tantalizing theories exist. Some link Iscariot to the Sicarii, the dagger men. These were the most radical of Jewish rebels, assassins who would hide short daggers in their cloaks and eliminate Roman officials and their collaborators in crowded streets before melting back into the populace. They were terrorists, freedom fighters, depending on your perspective. If Judas had ties to this world, it paints a picture of a man who was not just a follower, but a fiercely political operative, a man who burned with a desire. He wasn't just a face in the crowd of disciples. The Gospels tell us he was the treasurer, the keeper of the purse. This was a position of immense trust. The 12 were not wealthy. They lived off donations. Judas managed their daily bread, their resources, their very survival. To be given this role suggests he was seen as reliable, pragmatic, and intelligent. He was no fool. He was an insider. He heard the Sermon on the Mount with his own ears. He saw Lazarus walk out of his tomb. He witnessed the blind see, the lame walk, and the hungry fed with a few loaves and fishes. He was there. He saw the power. He felt the charisma. He heard the promises of a new kingdom. And this is where the central conflict begins. What kind of kingdom did Judas believe Jesus was building? If he was a nationalist, a zealot, when Jesus spoke of a kingdom of heaven, perhaps Judas heard the kingdom of Israel, restored and free. He saw a man who could command the loyalty of thousands, a man who could perform miracles that defied the laws of nature. This was a man who could surely defy the laws of Rome. He was the perfect general, the chosen one to lead the rebellion. Judas may have been waiting. He was waiting for the Messiah to reveal himself not as a lamb, but as the Lion of Judah. But the moment never came. Instead, Jesus spoke of turning the other cheek, of loving one's enemies, loving the Romans. For a man like Judas, a man who may have seen his countrymen bleed in the streets, this would have been incomprehensible. It would have felt like a betrayal of their cause, a squandering of divine power. Imagine the internal debates, the sleepless nights. He's counting the coins in the purse, a tangible, real-world responsibility, while his leader speaks in riddles about storing treasures in heaven. He's seeing the poverty and oppression around him, and the money they have is being spent on, in his view, trivialities. This brings us to a pivotal moment, a scene that the Gospels present as a key turning point, the anointing at Bethany. A woman, identified in John's Gospel as Mary, the sister of Lazarus, approaches Jesus. She carries an alabaster jar of spikenard, a perfume so expensive it was worth a year's wages for a common laborer, and she breaks it. She pours the entire contents over Jesus' head and feet. The scent, extravagantly, fills the entire house. It's an act of profound, lavish devotion. But Judas, why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor? On the surface, it's a noble sentiment. 300 denarii could have fed hundreds of families. It seems he's the only one thinking practically, the only one concerned with the social justice mission. But the Gospel of John immediately undercuts this, adding a damning narrator's note. He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief, and Judas was an embezzler. And his objection was not about the poor, but about a lost opportunity to line his own pockets. For centuries, this has been the accepted explanation. It's clean, it's simple, and it paints Judas as a common criminal whose petty greed had cosmic consequences. But let's pause and question that. Is it truly that simple? Is a man who walked away from his life to follow a penniless teacher for could his objection at Bethany be something more complex? What if we strip away John's commentary for a moment and just look at Judas's words? Why this waste? If Judas was a zealot, this act would have been infuriating. This was a war chest, a resource for the revolution, being poured out onto the ground. The revolution needed funds. It needed to feed its soldiers, to buy influence, perhaps even to buy weapons. It is the cry of a pragmatist watching his charismatic but infuriatingly unworldly leader squander their assets. He's seeing the great movement he signed up for dissolving into a cult of personality, focused on one man rather than the liberation of a nation. Perhaps this was the final straw, the moment he realized that Jesus' path and his own were diverging, that Jesus had no intention of being the Messiah Judas wanted. The Messiah, a plan to force Jesus' hand. A plan to create a confrontation that would compel him to unleash his power against their enemies. This wasn't about money. This was about forcing a revolution. He would arrange Jesus' arrest, but not for him to be killed. He would put Jesus in front of the Sanhedrin, in front of the Romans, in front of the powers of the world, creating a public stage so magnificent that Jesus would have no choice but to. It was a high-stakes gamble, a desperate attempt to steer the movement back towards the political liberation he so fiercely desired. A betrayal born not of hatred, but of a twisted, misguided love for his people and his leader. But there is another, even more profound and unsettling possibility. One that suggests Judas was not acting on his own disillusionment at all. What if he was acting on orders, to understand that it is not a surprise to him, it is his destiny? He tells his disciples, time and again, "The Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised." He knew. He wasn't just predicting it. He was stating it as a necessary part of a divine script. And that script required a betrayer. The ancient prophecies, the Psalm 41 reads, "Even my close friend, someone I trusted, one who shared my bread, has turned against me." Zechariah speaks of the Messiah being valued at a specific price, "So they paid me 30 pieces of silver." The details were written long before the actors took the stage. The plan required someone to hand him over, someone to set the final terrible act in motion without a betrayer. There is no arrest, so who would perform this necessary but eternally cursed role? This brings us to the chilling, claustrophobic atmosphere of the Last Supper. The 12 are gathered with their master. The air is thick with foreboding. Jesus looks at them, his chosen friends, and makes a devastating announcement. "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." Imagine the chaos, the shock. The disciples look at each other, but Jesus knows exactly who it is. And then, the most crucial, most overlooked exchange in the entire saga takes place. The Gospel of John describes it with cinematic detail. Jesus dips a piece of bread and hands it to Judas. It's a sign of intimacy, of a shared meal, and as Judas takes the bread, Jesus says to him, and to him alone, a phrase that is not a condemnation, but a command. It's the final authorization from a commander to his soldier to carry out a difficult, dangerous mission. It's as if Jesus is saying, "The time has come, the plan is in motion. Go now, play your part. In this light, Judas is no longer a rogue agent acting out of greed or political frustration. He is the designated actor, the one chosen to fulfill the prophecy. Why him? Perhaps because he was the... This is where we must venture outside the canonical Bible, into the sands of Egypt, where in the 1970s a discovery was made that sent shockwaves through the worlds of theology and history. A papyrus codex, dating back to the 3rd or 4th century, was unearthed. Its title, The Gospel of Judas. This text, declared heretical by the early church and lost for over 1600, it is a Gnostic gospel, meaning it comes from a mystical branch of early Christianity that viewed the physical world as a prison created by a lesser deity, and salvation as the escape of the soul, the divine spark, from the cage of the body. In this gospel, Judas is not the villain, he is the hero. He is Jesus' most beloved disciple, the only one who truly understands his master's teachings. He then draws Judas aside for a private revelation. He tells Judas, "You will be cursed by the other generation's fae, and you will come to rule over them." Jesus reveals to him the true mysteries of the cosmos, secrets he keeps hidden from the others. He shows Judas that his own body, the man that clothes him, is a prison for his divine spirit. And then comes the most explosive revelation of all. Jesus gives Judas, he says, "But you will exceed all of them, for you will sacrifice the man that clothes me." Sacrifice the man that clothes me in this version. The betrayal is not a betrayal at all. It is a liberation. It is the ultimate act of friendship and obedience. Judas is tasked with helping his master shed his physical form so that his true, divine self can be released. He is the instrument of Jesus' glorification. He must perform an act that will make the world hate him forever, an act that will cause his friends to curse him. But he does it out of love, out of understanding. As the final greatest service to his master, now it is crucial to state that the Gospel of Judas is not part of the accepted Christian Bible. The early church fathers, like Irenaeus of Lyon, condemned it as heresy. Its Gnostic worldview is fundamentally... It shows that the story was not always so simple, not always so black and white. It is a powerful testament to the idea that Judas's role may have been part of a cosmic predetermined plan. If you are finding this exploration into the hidden corners of history compelling, take a moment to click that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us continue to bring you these deep dives into the stories that shaped our world. So whether we look at it through the lens of a we are left with a far more complex, tragic and profound character. A man caught in the gears of prophecy and destiny. And now, we must walk with him into the darkness of that final night. The Garden of Gethsemane. The name itself means oil press, a place of immense pressure. Jesus is there praying, sweating blood in his anguish as he confronts his fate. The other disciples, the ones who... He leads a detachment of temple guards and Roman soldiers into the garden. They carry torches and lanterns and weapons cutting through the darkness of the night. It is a show of force meant to intimidate and ensure there is no resistance. Judas has been paid his 30 pieces of silver, the price of a slave, as foretold by the prophet Zechariah, a sum so paltry it almost mocks the idea of greed, as it feels symbolic, a piece of prophecy being slotted into place, rather than a genuine payment for services rendered. He approaches his master, and he has to identify him with a prearranged sign, a sign that has become the most infamous gesture in human history, a kiss. Why a kiss? He could have just pointed. That is the man. Arrest him. But a kiss, to use this intimate act as the signal of betrayal, is a level of perfidy that is almost poetic in its cruelty. Or is it, if Jesus and Judas were co-conspirators in a divine plan, the kiss changes its meaning. It is no longer an act of deceit. It becomes a final tragic farewell, a sorrowful acknowledgement of the role they both must play. A final moment of connection before the plan sweeps them apart forever. Again, not a cry of outrage, not "how could you?" It is an acceptance, a quiet, resigned acknowledgement. Friend. He still calls him friend, even in the moment of his capture. The guards seize Jesus, and the carefully laid plan, whether it was Judas's political gamble or God's divine script, is now irrevocably in motion. The die is cast. And it is if he was a political zealot who thought this arrest would trigger an uprising, He was catastrophically wrong. Jesus does not call down the legions of angels. He does not resist. When Peter draws a sword and cuts off a servant's ear, Jesus rebukes him and heals the man. He willingly goes with his captors. The gamble has failed. The would-be king has allowed himself to be taken like a common criminal. The dream, if we believe the Gnostic version, then Judas has fulfilled his duty. He has set his master on the path to liberation. His mission is accomplished. But the canonical Gospels tell us what happened next, and it is a portrait of utter human devastation. Judas watches from a distance as Jesus is dragged before the high priest, Caiaphas, and then before the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate. He hears the false testimonies. He sees the mockery. He didn't just trigger a confrontation. He has condemned an innocent man, his friend, his teacher, to the most agonizing death imaginable. The Gospels say that when Judas saw that Jesus was condemned, he was seized with remorse. Not satisfaction, not the cold calculation of a paid informant, but soul-crushing, gut-wrenching remorse. He takes the 30 pieces of silver, the blood money. He throws the coins onto the floor of the temple, the holy place. His words are a desperate, howling confession. I have sinned, for I have betrayed innocent blood. This is the cry of a broken man, a man who has made a terrible miscalculation, who has unleashed a horror he never intended. He is trying to undo it, to take it back. He returns the money. He confesses his sin. He does. Their reply is chilling in its callousness. What is that to us? That's your responsibility. They have used him, and now they discard him. The system has what it wants. Judas is left alone with his guilt, a guilt so immense, so all-consuming, that he can see only one way out. The accounts of his death differ. Matthew's Gospel says he went out and hanged himself. The book of Acts gives a more gruesome account, saying he bought a field with the reward of his iniquity, and falling headlong, he burst open in the middle, and all his bowels gushed out. For centuries, this horrific end has been presented as divine retribution, the just deserts for the ultimate traitor. But look at it through the lens of human psychology. It is the final, desperate act of a man who cannot live with what he has done. His suicide is not a punishment from God. It is a testament to the unbearable weight of his role in the story. It's fascinating to contrast Judas's fate with that of Peter. Peter, the rock, the chief disciple, also betrayed Jesus on that same night, not once, but 3 times. With oaths and curses he denied even knowing the man he had promised to die for. It was a betrayal born of fear, he weeps, he repents, and he is restored by Jesus after the resurrection. He goes on to become the leader of the church. Peter's betrayal is seen as a moment of human weakness, a relatable flaw. Judas's betrayal is seen as a mark of absolute, irredeemable evil. Why the difference? Perhaps because Peter's betrayal was a failure of courage, while Judas's act, whatever its motive, was an integral. Judas's sin could not be because it was the sin that the story required. He was the necessary monster, the scapegoat who had to bear the full weight of the blame so that the divine drama could reach its conclusion. His role was unique, essential, and eternally unforgivable. So we are left standing in the wreckage of a man's life, holding the pieces of a 2,000-year-old puzzle. Who was Judas Iscariot? The evidence feels too thin, the motive too simplistic to explain the magnitude of his actions. Was he a fiery nationalist, a disillusioned zealot who tried to force his Messiah into a political war, only to watch his plan backfire with horrific consequences? This is a compelling, psychologically rich portrait of a tragic revolutionary figure. Or was he something else entirely? Was he the trusted lieutenant, given the most terrible and painful task of all, to sacrifice his own name, his own reputation, his very soul, for all eternity, in order to set in motion the salvation of the world? Did he perform the ultimate act of obedience, knowing it would brand him as the ultimate traitor? This is the version that haunts us, the one that whispers from the lost pages of the Gospel of the story of Judas Iscariot forces us to confront our most basic ideas about good and evil, about destiny and free will. Was he a pawn in a divine chess game, moved by an unseen hand, or did he make a choice, and in that choice seal both his own damnation and the world's redemption? We cannot know for certain. The true contents of Judas's heart were buried with him in that field of blood 2,000 years ago. They ask us to consider the possibility that even in the darkest acts, there may be a glimmer of a purpose we cannot comprehend. Judas Iscariot's legacy is one of infamy. His name is a weapon, a curse. Dante placed him in the lowest circle of hell, in the very mouth of Satan, the ultimate punishment for the ultimate sin. But without him, the story of Christianity as we know it does not exist. The cross, an instrument of torture, leads directly to the resurrection. The resurrection, the triumph over death, is the cornerstone of an entire faith. It is all connected, a chain of events forged in a garden in the dead of night. Betrayer, revolutionary, or chosen one. The final verdict may be forever beyond our grasp. But in re-examining his story, we do not seek. He remains a figure of profound and unsettling mystery, a man whose single act, for whatever reason, changed the course of human history forever. He is the 13th apostle, the eternal outsider, the man who stands as a permanent reminder that the greatest stories are never as simple as they seem. All right, that is all for today's video. We've journeyed through a story filled with controversy and mystery. What do you think? Was Judas a pawn of... It truly helps the channel grow and allows us to create more content like this. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.